Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features Darker Image number 1, cover dated March 1993. And what I'm interested in this video is Jim Lee's Deathblow character, depicted here on the cover by Sam Keith, along with his own Max, and also Rob Liefeld's Bloodwolf. So I'm going to turn to the inside credits page, and we'll see here that for Deathblow, the credited creators are Brandon Choi and Jim Lee, co-creators and responsible for the story, Jim Lee story and art. So he's inking himself on this comic, which is very interesting. I always find it intriguing when Jim Lee inks himself, and in many ways I prefer him inking himself. The letters are by Mike Heisler and color assists by Wendy Fouts, but it's more or less kind of a black and white comic. So as I said, I'm not going to bother with the other features of this anthology, and instead I'm going to skip straight to Deathblow. And the way that it opens here is in the jungle, and a voiceover, first person voiceover. As it turns out, Deathblow himself, Michael Cray, saying he hates the jungle. I hate the jungle, nothing but goddamn foliage. But I hate this heat even more, too humid to even sweat. The longer I'm on the river, the more I remember why I never bothered coming back to this hellhole. So there's a number of intertexts, so to speak, text films that are being quoted and pastiched in this story. Everything from Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now to also Predator, the very first movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger. So what's happening here is Deathblow is getting a boat ride up the river, and this is his captain here, who his name is Paolo. And Deathblow says in his first person narration, he likes to live dangerously by playing both sides of the fence. Most of the time he runs the drug traffickers up and down this little river, but he gets the occasional spook now and then. Talks too much for his own good, but he knows the routine. I've been running for 36 hours straight now, but only 4 more to go. I checked the hardware I scored from an old IO case. So in the Image Universe, in the Wildstorm corner of the universe, IO's international operations, they feature in the Wildcats comics. The boys at MacLean will really appreciate that, especially Lynch, and Lynch is the director of IO. Then it's time to drop the disguise, so he takes off his Panama hat and glasses, and as he says there, he puts on his game face and gets down to business. The Pietro, don't know why I still bother bringing the old 92 with me, so what's this sidearm for? And then he says, tried to sleep, but there's no point. The beads of sweat rolling down my face feel like an army of marching ants, but the sun's going down. Just have to wait a little longer. I feel the engines shut down as we approach the dock. And then Paolo comes down below deck. Hey, gringo, you still alive down there? And he sees the vision of who his passenger truly is out of his disguise. And Deathblow turns to him. 3/4 profile, end of the line, Paolo. So let's comment on the art here. What's really striking about this is not the usual superhero style for Jim Lee. Instead, it is influenced by Frank Miller, and I'm going to point out a little later where I see some Jeff Darrow influence as well. And of course, what he's doing here is he is using an ink brush for most of the inking. A few other tools as well where he cuts in white media, such as here, in order to indicate those beams of light coming down below decks. Ink splatter here. I'd say the foliage of the trees in these establishing shots were pretty fun to do. So it is a very different style from Jim Lee, and obviously at the time he was looking to have a bit of fun. Suit himself, do something a little bit different from what would normally be expected of him, and maybe scratch some itches from his days working on Punisher War Journal, for example, and the abandoned Punisher Nick Fury graphic novel that he was working on before he quit Marvel for Image Comics, because I think that some of the kind of background and backcloth and what's going on in this issue in terms of covert ops and hardware and tech and and kind of politics is very much in the ballpark of what that Punisher Nick Fury graphic novel was supposed to have been. So back to the story. There's only 9 pages of story, so this is going to be a relatively short video, especially when you get like a massive spread like this one of Deathblow in his combat gear, this huge machine gun in one hand, and then Pietro getting the fright of his life. Madre Dio, he says there. And Deathblow replies, I think you're praying to the wrong side, Paolo. So the guy begs for his life. He has information, but Deathblow isn't ready to listen. He says he got everything he needs, but thanks for the ride. And then blam blam, he uses his pistol to take out Pietro, who's blasted off the side of the boat. So again, just really cool. The art on these pages. Deathblow, just massive muscled figure, but really what's most interesting here is the inking, the spotting of blacks, and the devices that Jim Lee is using. For example, here with Deathblow, basically blacking out the entirety of his face and just working in pieces of his physiognomy and neck anatomy with some white ink here. So interesting techniques. I like it, but in a few pages time I'm going to talk to you about somebody who didn't like it, and you'll see soon enough who that was. So establishing shot here of Washington DC, and there is a covert meeting between director of IO Lynch, this security czar Craven, this character here with the scarred interesting looking face, smoking his cigarette there, and then they're speaking to a special missions operative that they're charging with a mission to go after Cray. So let's pick up with the story here when Craven says that Cray has gone rogue, and then he asks Lynch to fill the operative in. He says back in 1990, Cray and his partner covertly infiltrated Costa Mesa on a special operations group mission to interdict certain drug trafficking routes. Unfortunately, they were discovered. Cray managed to escape, but his partner was captured. The leader of the junta, General Manuel Ortega, never reported the incident, but he tortured and killed our man. Cray's always felt responsible for the man's death. Anyway, Cray's back in Costa Mesa to even the score by assassinating Ortega. So the guy just doesn't understand why now. And Craven fills him in. He's dying, Lieutenant Conrad. Now here we see this image of Ortega up on screen here. This is very much that Jeff Darrow style from Hard-Boiled era of Jeff Darrow. And we'll see it more clearly on the next couple of pages here, where we get a bit of a double page spread. So we've got these different screens here featuring Deathblow's face and then Ortega. So you get a little bit more detail there, and you can see that line work, that fine line work that is very evocative of Jeff Darrow. And again, more fun for Jim Lee on these pages with the ink lines and the brushwork. And like see here, for example, no holding line on the back of Craven's chair. And then the fine line work on Deathblow's face. What he's doing here is he's taking this image and he has transferred it probably by computer or photocopier up here and tilted the angle for this screen image here. So this is Lieutenant Conrad, and he's the guy that's getting briefed on this mission. He's a former colleague of Deathblow's, and that's why they've hired him. So Craven says here, it is imperative that you stop Commander Cray before he reaches Ortega. Because of your past experience with him, you'll lead the strike team on this mission. So he says, very good, sir. And Lynch says, you will be flying out of MacDill Air Base to our staging point in the Honduras and then choppered into Costa Mesa tonight. This should give you the jump on Cray. Once you find Commander Cray, you are to terminate him on sight. Terminate? Asks Conrad with extreme prejudice. Something wrong, Lieutenant Conrad? No, nothing at all, sir. I'll do my best. So, of course, this is a quotation from that famous scene in Apocalypse Now where Martin Sheen's character is briefed about Colonel Kurtz, and then he is asked to terminate him on sight, and ask that question, terminate, and then the CIA guy who hasn't said a word throughout the whole meeting comes in and says, with extreme prejudice. So there you go. And so he tells him, you're going to succeed, and he says, yes, sir. So let's continue. The last 2 pages. So what we have here is the guys are in on their chopper here, and Conrad is, and by the way, Joseph Conrad was the author of Heart of Darkness, which was the original novel that was the inspiration for Apocalypse Now. So that's another little reference that's worked into this story too. So Conrad here is thinking to himself, excuse me, by the way, one little detail that I should have pointed out earlier is the reason that Craven and Lynch think that Deathblow is doing what he's doing is he's got a brain tumor. And so Conrad here thinks having cancer ain't exactly a walk in the park, but hell, he's faced death more times than a Bangkok whore's been inoculated by the 7th Fleet. It just comes with the territory, especially with the teams. It just doesn't make any sense. Besides, if it weren't for him, I'd be planted 6 feet under in Arlington. I owe the man for saving my hide twice back in Panama. None of this should make any difference to me, but it does. So he's got conflicted feelings about going after Cray, going after Deathblow. And then we get an introduction in this vertical panel here to his team. So we've got this guy Hopper, Green Beret. We've got this guy Ford, a Marine Recon. And then we've got Blackbird, a Ranger. So that's his team. So there's 4 of them going after Cray. He says here, it almost seems unfair, all of us against one dying man. But then I remind myself who we're dealing with. Okay, so we're getting Cray like a sense of how dangerous and how formidable he is by what Conrad is saying here. I like the shot of the, it is a Black Hawk that's dropped them down into the jungle, and Blackbird the tracker picks up on Deathblow's trail, and finally Conrad says the man may be dying, but he's not going out easy. He's making it into a race. Might even enjoy this if it weren't for the damn heat and humidity. Reminds me too much of Panama. I hate the jungle. So it's the exact same thing that Deathblow said at the opening of the story. And I like the little kind of whited out silhouettes of the 4-man team jogging into the jungle with their weapons, tracking Cray. And then we've got our establishing shot once again of an interesting one here of Washington DC again, and a little confab between Craven. Very high contrast spotting of blacks here. No holding lines on his chair now at this point, and Lynch hovering over computer unit, and they're getting some news on the wire. So what news are they getting? That green fin head in Chicago has made the national news again, so a reference there to Savage Dragon. And also there are also confirmed reports of an unregistered superpowered being trashing a biker gang in New York, and that's a reference to Dale Keown's Pit. So then they get back to the business at hand. Priority message from the Central American Station Chief. The strike team has just been inserted and is headed inland. So Craven says, excellent, how long before they make contact? Right now, they're about 30 clicks from Ortega's compound. It should be all over in the next 6 hours. So Lynch asks here, do you think the mission was really necessary considering the risks involved? And Craven says, doesn't matter what I think, only what is believed. Ortega has become a political albatross for this administration, and the people on Pennsylvania Avenue want the matter resolved with credible deniability. That's our job, Jack. To be continued. It's not really too much of a cliffhanger here. Maybe we could have a kind of like a better cliffhanger in terms of Conrad's team catching up with Deathblow, perhaps. But in any case, there you go. It's the first 9 pages of Jim Lee's new art style, new character Deathblow, and giving Jim Lee a chance to go back into that Punisher, Nick Fury, special operations type territory that he's obviously interested in and wanted to have another crack at. But this new art style caused a little bit of a ripple in the comics industry, and one person who was not happy with it was none other than Frank Miller. And Frank Miller shows his displeasure later on in 1993 in A Dame to Kill For, where he has Marv, when Marv first shows up in A Dame to Kill For, in a bar after having battered to bits none other than Deathblow here on the ground. And Dwight asks him, "How's it going, Marv?" And Marv says, "You know, Dwight, same old, as he has his foot right on a brutally battered Deathblow. So Frank Miller was not happy with Jim Lee imitating his Sin City art style, and he developed on that in the letters page to the first issue of A Dame to Kill For, the serialized comic, where he explained that he really didn't appreciate artists copying his style, and he much prefer artists to pursue their own individual styles. So Jim Lee was a bit ashamed about that, because of course Frank Miller's a hero of his. But much later on, they were accorded, of course, with their work on, for example, Batman and Robin, the Boy Wonder, All-Star Batman and Robin, the Boy Wonder. So there you go. I do hope that you enjoyed this quick review and commentary on Darker Image #1, and specifically Jim Lee's section of it, Deathblow. If you liked the video, please do so. Like the video on YouTube, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.